Nowadays, data scientists leverage tools like InfluxDB for advanced analytics in manufacturing when the use cases involve extreme volume of data, cloud use cases. So in this video, we're going to discuss the trade-off to find between, on one side, the technical effort required to unlock InfluxDB capabilities, and on the other side, the actual payback to address some business needs in manufacturing. So there are many prerequisite questions to ask. First of all, is your IIoT platform truly open to these IT tools? Then, how to unlock the data communication to InfluxDB via REST API or MQTT? But first of all, I think the first question to ask is, are you sure your use case really can't be solved by simply using a classical historian? Because if you take something like this and you really look at it, inside your IoT platform, you can already pull some field data, and have it historized with the classical or like inbuilt tool that is inside Ignition, for instance, or inside WinCC OA or whatever IoT platform you use. But you really need to question the use case when you want to move to more advanced stuff like InfluxDB, because there is setup and technical effort involved, and sometimes even in terms of pricing for licensing and for development costs, there is more to it. So we really need to make sure it can answer the need. If not, sometimes it's worth just using the classical historian, but we're going to monitor all of that with a simple demo here. We've put in place inside a containerized environment a lab. You can see here a tutorial on how to create that lab for yourself if you want to replicate it. But the idea is just to use a simple case in order to show you the difference between the two, using classical historian and using InfluxDB as your historian. So this is how it will work. We're taking some field data. In that case, it's OPC UA. We're sending it to Ignition, our IoT platform in this case. And then, instead of using the classical historian of Ignition, I'm going to show you how it is pushed inside InfluxDB. So there are two ways to communicate between Ignition and InfluxDB. First way is MQTT protocol, which we're not using in that demo. And the second way is REST API, which I will show you in this demo. So we're using the second way, REST API communication, to go from Ignition and send the data, the field data, to InfluxDB historian. As I told you, here you have a complete tutorial that has been made by my colleague here, so you can go over it and see how to deploy the containers in your environments. But basically, we just using here a simulator for the live data. Then we have Ignition as our IoT platform. InfluxDB is here as the historian, and we just added a Grafana layer just to have some beautiful graphics just to test it. But yeah, so here you can see that the first and main component of this communication, is this part between Ignition and InfluxDB, the REST API configuration. So there you have your tag coming from your OPC UA device. You see the temperature going up and down, but the main component, and this is delivered in the Git repository, so you can really replicate it and see how it's done, but it's really this script, on how to create the API communication. So you need to build something. It's not native. You need to build something in order to send some data via the API REST communication from Ignition to InfluxDB. You can do it either one by one by sending each tag individually, or you can do it as a batch by sending all tags that you have labeled or mentioned in your JSON, for instance. You can send them as a bucket to your REST API. Those are using some classical post HTTP requests. So these you will see frequently on API requests, REST API at least, and they are using WebSockets, sending the data via these kind of requests. But this is what is involved when you want to communicate from your IoT platform to external third-party IT tools. So you really need to make sure this is worth it, because sometimes if the team doesn't have the skills to put that in place, and if the use case doesn't really need to involve something like InfluxDB, maybe it's more wise, or to just go with the standard like historian of your inbuilt platform. And that's a question that you need to discuss with your team. What do you really want to address, and is the effort really worth it? I'm going to show you a quick table just to summarize the, let's say, decision-making criteria, right? So if you take, for instance, Ignition Historian, like your native historian inside your platform, versus InfluxDB as your historian or whatever external historian that you want to use, there are some differences between both. And here in green, you can see where one, let's say, one choice is better than the other, but there is no like one-stop choice. It always depends on what you want to do. So let's start with the setup and integration in terms of how you integrate it, how you make it happen technically. It's very easy when it's native historian of your platform, because there is zero config. It's directly inside it. If you want to use something external, of course, you will need modules or setup or scripting. That's not so easy to do. I mean, at least for your standard industrial guy who is at the facility, you will probably need some external support from an integrator like OTEM, for instance, but definitely it's not straightforward. Then, in terms of performance and size, if you just need something reliable running on production and nothing more, then maybe the native historian is already good. If you need something more, and that's where InfluxDB can be relevant, if you need some, for instance, to have ingestion rate management, compression for historized data, or extreme volume of data, cloud analytics, advanced things like that, then it becomes relevant to invest into communication with InfluxDB or external historian, because then all of those cannot be done by the native historian. At least for Ignition, as far as I know, you will need something else in order to do those advanced analytics. But it's fine. I mean, if your facility has reached already a point where you want to have more granular information, then fine. You can definitely go that route. In terms of performance, it's fine. Then for support, does the platform provide support? Of course, the native tool inside your IoT platform will provide the support, and also some nice toolings like store and forward, but the developers, I mean, the editors from those kind of tools, so in the case of Ignition, it's inductive automation, they already provide the support, so you don't need to have something more in terms of, let's say, budget for support or for SLA, for instance. If you're going for an external tool, bear in mind that it's an additional tool, and whenever you add a new component in your architecture or on your infrastructure, you need to really pay attention on the costs, not just the one-shot cost, but also like the more day-to-day, we call it OPEX cost, like how much it will cost you every year in terms of yearly fees for support. And then you start relying on an additional partner, an additional vendor. So, and again, it's just a trade-off. You need to be aware of that before making your decision. So this is the quick comparison between both ways, like using the native historian versus using an external advanced historian like InfluxDB. But again, take the time, go with your team, experiment, play with it in order to really see the constraints on a little small use case like that. And then you'll be able to make the difference between both, because if you really look at it, let me make a quick sketch here. If you really look at it in terms of architecture, most of the sites will be already happy with things like that. So from the field device having communication with their IoT platform, and they just historize it natively here. But then whenever you start having advanced use cases, it can become relevant to interface with, let's say, more advanced things like InfluxDB. So that's where you expand your use case there. But normally you don't want to expand before reaching a certain threshold in terms of maturity of your 4.0 use cases. So it's just a matter of how you assess your maturity in terms of IoT. So you need to assess this before expanding to InfluxDB, before expanding to other visualization tools like Grafana, for instance. I think it's always a matter of how we manage the change, how we improve by small little steps, and it's very important not to go directly to the more advanced use case if you have not validated it for a regular day-to-day use case with a simple version. Normally you shouldn't go directly to the more advanced stuff, but it's up to you. I just wanted to remind here what all the things that are at stake. At least you have everything here before making any mistake or any big decision. So if there is anything that you want me to go into details, let me know. You have all my contacts on the channel. And thanks again for watching the channel. So any question, just mention them in the comments and let me know if you liked it. Otherwise, we meet again next week in the next video. Thank you, guys.